Hey, my name's Paul, and welcome to our Glimpses of Jesus series. We're on a journey through the Old Testament section of the Bible, stopping off at the main events, seeing what happened, and thinking about how they point us to Jesus and salvation in Him. In this episode, we're going to look at a really significant moment in the Bible. God narrows the focus down onto one person, a man called Abraham, later renamed Abraham. Have you ever put together flat-packed furniture? There's that initial feeling of confidence as you throw away the instructions. You know what you're doing. But then the bubble is burst as you try to fit a drawer that will only go in upside down. Okay, no big deal. You'll take it apart and start again. But where's the guarantee you'll get it right this time? In Genesis 1, God made the world perfect, but it was ruined by sin and rebellion. God has promised to save and restore, but as we look on, that plan is hitting some obstacles. God removes Adam and Eve from the garden, but it doesn't stop them sinning. He warns Cain, but it doesn't stop him sinning. People die, but it doesn't stop us sinning. God resets creation, sin remains. God confuses languages, sin becomes multilingual. Now, God knows what He's doing. This isn't a record of God's trial and error till He gets it right. God is not building a piece of flat-pack furniture without instructions. But it can feel a bit like that. As God focuses in on one family, the family of Terah and his son Abraham, as He calls them to leave Ur to travel to Canaan, they stop in Haran and settle there, and Terah dies. But then God calls Abraham to restart the journey and head again to Canaan. As God takes this family, whose family line leads directly to Jesus, how do we know that His plan won't be derailed by the problem of sin? The first answer is this: God's plan is built on grace. His salvation is a free gift given to people who don't deserve it. It's reliant on the kindness of God and not on the goodness of our works. Genesis chapter 11 and verse 27 says, "These are the family records of Terah. Terah fathered Abraham, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot." Why this family and not another? What did Terah and Abraham do that others hadn't? The answer's nothing. Later, Joshua tells the people of Israel, Abraham's descendants, "Long ago, your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham, and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates River and worshipped other gods." Terah and Abraham worshipped other gods. They were sinners, just like everyone else. There was nothing that made them attractive to God. The reason He chose them is grace. We see the same thing as we look at Abraham's life. In Genesis 12, Abraham heads to Egypt because of a famine. Verses 11 to 13 tell us, "When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, 'Look, I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, "This is his wife." They will kill me, but let you live. Please say you're my sister, so it will go well with me because of you, and my life will be spared on your account." Abraham is running scared and persuades Sarai to lie to save his own back. This is hardly a moment to be proud of. Yes, Abraham is often commended for his faith that he's shown in leaving his home in Ur and setting out with the call of God to Canaan. But here, it's as if he forgets to pack faith in his suitcase. Why is God focusing on Abraham? It's grace. God's plan is based on grace, not on our works. That's really important. What do we see about ourselves in the early chapters of Genesis? We're people made in God's image. But we've messed up. We were made to serve God, but we rebelled. We deserve God's condemnation and judgment, and we can do nothing about it. If God's plan was based on our works, it would always fail. We can't erase sin, we can't remove it, we can't beat it. The only plan that works is one that's based on grace, God's undeserved kindness. And that's exactly what we find as we trace what God is doing here through to its conclusion in Jesus. Listen to this invitation in Isaiah chapter 55 and verse 1. Come, everyone who is thirsty, come to the water, and you without silver, come, buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without silver and without cost. Sound too good to be true? That's what grace does. Takes something amazing, salvation, and makes it free. God's plan is going to work because it's built on grace. But that's not all. It's also built on promises. In Genesis chapter 12 and verses 2 and 3, we read God's promises to Abraham. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse anyone who treats you with contempt. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. What does God promise here? He promises to make Abraham into a great nation. That means he will have a ton of descendants. Follow the Bible through and you see this promise being worked out. About 400 years later, in the book of Numbers, Moses takes a census, just of the men of fighting age in Abraham's family. There's 603,550 of them, a great nation. But it's not just people, it's also land. In Genesis chapter 12 and verse 6 and 7 we read, Abraham passed through the land to the site of Shechem, at the oak of Moreh. The Lord appeared to Abraham and said, to your offspring I will give this land. Abraham's descendants will be a great people with a land to live in, the land of Canaan, which is modern-day Palestine and Israel. That's the first promise. In the second promise, God says he will bless and protect Abraham. Genesis chapter 12 and verse 3. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse anyone who treats you with contempt. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. The pages that follow show God keeping this promise. Everywhere Abraham goes, his flocks and possessions grow. He's a stranger, yet seems to command respect. In Genesis 14, he's caught up in a seismic battle for power. Some kings swoop down and defeat the city of Sodom and carry off Abraham's nephew Lot and his family. Abraham gathers his servants and turns them into a commando unit. He chases down the army, defeats them, and brings back Lot and all the people and goods that were stolen. He's unharmed. Why? God was watching over him. And Abraham recognizes this. When he meets a priest of God called Melchizedek, the first thing he does is give thanks to God by offering a tenth of everything he'd brought back. Yet the blessings are not just for Abraham. God promises to bless the whole world through him. Again, the pages of the Bible show this promise coming true. One example comes at the end of Genesis. Abraham's great-grandson Joseph is in Egypt, helping everyone to overcome a great famine. The world is being blessed through a descendant of Abraham. Yet most of all, this is pointing us forward to Jesus. In Matthew chapter 1 and verse 1, we read this about Jesus. An account of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. The promise is telling us that through Jesus, the son of Abraham, the world will be blessed. How? John chapter 3 and verse 16 says, For God loved the world in this way. He gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. God's plan is based on his promises. Just as grace is important, this is vital too. We make promises, but do we keep them? Always? We might mean to, but we forget. Stuff happens, we change our minds, or maybe we just don't want to. But God is different. When he says something, he does it. And he does it every time. These promises, they will come true. They will happen. It will work. So that's two concrete reasons why God's plan will work. Grace and promise. But there's one more here. In verse 7 we read, The Lord appeared to Abraham and said, To your offspring I will give this land. This plan is not just for Abraham. It's for the generations that come afterwards as well. There's no use-by date. It's for the future as well as the past. We see this as we walk through the Old Testament. In Genesis chapter 25 and verses 7 to 8, we're told about Abraham's death. This is the length of Abraham's life, 175 years. He took his last breath and died at a good old age, old and contented. Abraham dies, but the promise doesn't. Abraham's family continues to grow. They head to Egypt, and then 400 years later they return and settle in Canaan, the land God promised. Yet as we go through the Old Testament, there's always this nagging feeling that it isn't quite what God intended. Why is that? Because the promise to Abraham and his descendants is not primarily about the physical nation that would come from him, but about one descendant and the spiritual nation he would gather. This is what Paul is talking about in Galatians chapter 3 and verse 16. Now the promises were spoken to Abraham and to his seed. He does not say and to seeds, as though referring to many, but referring to one, and to your seed, who is Christ. After a lesson in semantics, the word seed or offspring can be plural or singular, Paul points out that God's intention was the singular, not the plural. Who's he talking about? He's talking about Jesus, the descendant of Abraham. Look, a lot happens in the Old Testament and it's really important. But the main reason it's there is to point forward to something better. The nation of Israel is impressive. They are God's people in the Old Testament. But they aren't the end of God's plan. They aren't the goal he's working towards. That's Jesus. Israel is the signpost, but Jesus is the destination. Jesus, who is God, come down into this world. Jesus, who dies on the cross and pays for sin. Jesus, who is raised in victory over death. Jesus, who inherits the promises of the covenant. Jesus, who shares these promises with all who trust in him. As Paul says in Galatians chapter 3 and verses 28 to 29, and if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed, heirs according to the promise. Now this is really important. If the promises are just for Abraham, for Sarah, for Lot, for Isaac, they get God's blessing. That's great, but that's it. But this is bigger. This is global. This is multi-generational. This is for you and me. What God is doing here means you and I can be saved. It means you and I can know God. It means you and I can come to a place where God promises us that he will bless us and protect us. It means we can be part of a great nation that God has been building since the start of time. It means you and I can one day live in the restored creation with Jesus forever. How do I know it will work? That's a crucial question. If I'm going to trust God, if I'm going to believe in Jesus, I want to know that this is not foolish faith, but grounded faith. If you put flat pack furniture together without the instructions, just randomly joining bits together, there's no certainty it will end up right. But this is different. God's plan is based on grace, so my failure won't derail it. It's based on his promises, so my faithlessness won't destroy it. It's built to last, so the fact that I am alive 4,000 years after Abraham doesn't make a blind bit of difference. God's plan of salvation works. It's cast iron guaranteed.